I think probably because that's been a journey for me in my lifetime, and I think it is for a lot of people, especially if you have any kind of neurodivergence or in anything like that. If you don't really fit the mold. I was a kid who didn't fit the mold, and so really starting to accept all the different parts of myself, accept the dark parts as well as the light parts, accept the different parts as well as the parts that fit in. That's a continuing journey that I think a lot of people experience. And so I think it just made its way into my writing unintentionally. I never, planned out that I'm going to write a series about self-acceptance. I didn't do that. But, if I reverse analyze it, looking back now at what I wrote, that's the kind of the theme I can see running through it. And it makes sense to me for my life and for how I've grown over the years.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. If you want a great example of a website, okay? Like a great example, like beautiful website. We'll have a link for it in the show notes. It's for the guest that's on the show today. Anne is here. We're going to be talking about her books. There's lots of things here for you. And we're going to kickstart this episode the right way by having Anne on the podcast. Anne, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Did you get that little kickstart in there? Did you get that?
I did. Yeah, I did. That was good. I heard it.
It was just for you. Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And tell everybody where you are in this great big world of ours.
I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, U.S.
There you go.
Currently rainy, but lovely.
Nice. I have friends that live there. They are great people in Pittsburgh. So you must be one of them, which is great. Awesome.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm an import Pittsburgher, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Tell us where you're imported from.
So originally I was born on the West Coast in Washington State, not far from Seattle. Grew up most of my childhood near Boulder, Colorado, and then moved out here for college.
And you stayed?
Yeah. Met my husband, did, the whole thing.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah. Well, there you go. Good stuff. What do you love about that part of the world then? What's beautiful about that?
The trees. It's so green. Everything is foresty, which really jives with me. I love the scenery. I love the terrain. Yeah.
Your website is foresty, a lot of green on your website too, right?
Yeah.
So,
I have a theme going. My house is green. Yeah.
I see it. I like it. Let's start with your journey. And we have authors listening to the show. They are on their journey as an author. They're just starting. They don't have no idea what's ahead of them. They're going to walk towards this forest, which is writing a book.
Yep.
And you've already been through the forest and cut down the trees and made a path. And here you are. But what could you say to somebody who's entering this journey for the first time? What would have been helpful for you to hear on a podcast?
Yeah. So I think, I'm probably the first person who would say, just give me really practical step-by-step advice. This is how to do it. And what I found for me personally is that there is all that information there, and it's really important to develop your craft and all this kind of thing. But honestly, mindset and learning not just how to write, but how to live as a writer and how to let yourself be a writer is half the battle, if not more. Just getting over any mental blocks, getting all of these kind of romanticized ideas that people have about what being a writer is or what it has to look like or what the process has to be, and really just figuring out who you are as a writer and what your setup is and how to make it work in your life and your lifestyle, whatever situation or circumstances you have going on. That's the big part right there. And for me, that's what I had to work the most on in order to actually get the words out and get finished books.
What changed for you in the process of writing? Like, how are you a different person?
So basically, at the beginning, I was really hung up on if I was going to write something, would it be good or not? Or would it be me? What was my voice? Who was I on the page as a writer? And because I was hung up on all those things, I just wasn't writing at all. And so eventually I got to a place in my life where I was kind of dissatisfied enough with the path I was going because it wasn't having anything to do with writing. And I basically just said, look, you got to get over it. If you don't get over it, nothing's going to change. The book isn't going to write itself. There's not going to be any kind of life occurrence that suddenly makes you a writer. Like you just have to do it. And so rather than waiting for the perfect opportunity or circumstance or muse or whatever, I just started carrying notebooks with me everywhere. And I wrote on the bus stop, waiting for the bus, or I wrote at the deli on my lunch break, or I wrote, just anywhere completely unglamorous or uninspired, or if I was in the mood or if I wasn't in the mood. And that's what I had to do in order to just get words on the page. And once they were on the page, then you can do something with them. But if they don't exist, then you're just not writing. You don't have a book.
Right.
So that I think was the biggest hurdle for me. It was just getting to not writing at all to actually writing.
Okay. Who inspires you as an author?
Who inspires me? Well, there's so many authors that I was inspired by I was always a voracious reader, and I have had dozens of favorite authors throughout my entire life. And I think what inspired me was that whenever I would hit times in my life where maybe it was a rocky place or I was working through something or whatever, just there were so many times that just the right words from the right book at the right time found me and hit me, and I would read it and kind of see myself in the story and be like, hey, this worked out for these people this way, or I know that these situations or emotions are common to the human condition because these writers are writing about them, and those really helped me at various times in my life. And the thought that maybe I could create something that would do that for other people is very inspiring for me. That's kind of the crux of why I do what I do, I think, in the hopes that someday someone will pick up a book and it will speak to them at the right time.
Talk a little bit about how you landed on your new line of books and kind of where you're going as an author. Why did you go this direction? You could have written a cookbook, you could have written a children's book, you could have written anything. But what took you down this path?
Well, I mean, so I write young adult fantasy, and that's, for one, is what I always loved reading most. So it's just kind of where, as a reader, I was living, so naturally it kind of translated to what I was writing. But what I really, really love about fantasy, what I think the greatest thing about fantasy is that you can basically create a world where you make up the rules, right? You have to follow your own rules, but you can make them up. And so you have this complete imaginative freedom to create any world that you want that can be as metaphoric as you want or whatever. And it's, completely, there's no limitations there. And that creates the outer journey of your fantasy story, right? But then there's always the inner journey. And the inner journey of the characters are what make the story feel real. And so when you can make real human emotion mesh with this completely imaginary world, that's how you create this feeling of something completely imaginary being very, very real. And that's in fantasy, that's just a magical combination where you can then infuse whatever, themes or issues or whatever you're wanting to portray, and you can get at them both from like this outer world where everything is metaphoric and everything, and also this inner world where it's very real and connects to our own lives, and create a story that way that can inspire people or heal people or whatever. That's what I love about fantasy.
How do you connect a character to a reader? Like, how do you build that bridge so that a reader reading this book feels some sort of connection with this character?
So for me, it's all emotion and how that emotion feels in your physical body. You can describe it that way. So, in fantasy stories, there's obviously a lot of situations that people in today's life are not going to run across. Most of us are not royalty or fairies or, werewolves or whatever you have. But whatever situations those characters find themselves in, there's always a human parallel that will create the same emotion that would create. For example, in my first book, towards the beginning, the main character has a complete 180 of her life plan. She's on this one path of being a royal and getting ready to take over her kingdom. And then she has to make the choice whether she sticks with that or goes in a completely different direction that she never saw coming. And clearly this has never happened to me. But when I was young, I was on a path. I was, halfway through my undergrad degree, and an opportunity that I had never planned on, never foresaw, came up to audition for this touring group. I was in a music school. I was learning to be a violinist at the time. And I thought, what the heck? I'll audition for that. And so in this whirlwind, 2-3 weeks, I auditioned. I was accepted. I moved across the country to Pittsburgh and just went on this completely new life path that I had not planned out at all. And so that situation, there's a lot of emotions involved in that. There's the chaos of your whole world being shaken up. There's, the fear of like, what if I go and it's a mistake? There's the fear of what if I don't go and I end up regretting it? And so all those things, all those same emotions relate to this other storyline, which is fantastical. That character is going to feel a bunch of those same things. Like, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I regret it? What if I, go and it's a mistake? So if you can tap into whatever is a common emotional reality in our real world and put it in the fantasy world, that makes it feel very, very real, because everyone has those moments. Everyone has had moments where they feel whatever emotions these characters are feeling. And so if you can correlate between the two and just dig into your own personal story, as mundane or unfantastical as it may be, that makes that world feel really real.
Yeah, you explain this like it sounds easy to do. It's like,
oh, it's not
pretty straightforward. It's not, right? It takes a lot of work.
No, it's not. Yeah, and honestly, when it takes like a lot of like back thought to figure out how that process worked. At the time, it does not feel laid out and easy. It's a very messy process a lot of the time, or difficult, or but in the end, the result is worth it, I think, and it's very rewarding, and it can be therapeutic both for writers and for readers.
How many characters did you have originally in your mind when you sat down to write? Did you have one main character and then supplemental characters kind of showed up in the writing process? Like, I haven't written a book, so you got me here. Yeah. I'm completely just at a loss here. What's the origin of the character development? How does that start?
So for me, when I start thinking about a story, there's usually a main character that I think of, and it's usually I don't think I've ever had the whole story figured out. It's usually like 2 or 3 scenes that kind of pop into my head. I'm like, oh yeah, those are gonna start making a story. And so it's usually just the main character with maybe 1 or 2, 1 to 3 supplementary characters who fill out those scenes that are in my mind. And then as the story goes, then more and more of them tend to pop up. But in the beginning, it's usually pretty simple, just between 1 and 4 or 5 characters at most.
When do you know the finish line for the story?
That depends, depending on the book. As I like, and I don't write in order, but I do usually write the endings last. And in my mind, if I've done my work well, by the time I get to the ending should write itself, because everything you've set up should just fall into place. And it should be, even if it's not, even if you can't necessarily foresee the ending, it should feel very natural because of what happened before.
Okay.
So sometimes I have known the ending beforehand and written it. Sometimes I have not known how to end it at all until I get there, but then figure out how it's supposed to be. And sometimes I've written the ending and then realize I wrote the wrong ending and I have to go back and change it. But yeah, if the rest of the story has done its job, then the ending should take care of itself, is how I see it.
Interesting, because I've had some authors come on and they write the ending first, and then they reverse engineer the story back to the beginning, but they always know where they're going to end up. And I'm like, that's interesting too. Like, again, like as a non-author in this conversation, all of this is magical to me. I don't know how you do this as an author, and for me, I would love to see the story unfold in front of me. Like it's kind of just a few steps ahead of you at all times, and you're just kind of following this and following the journey of your characters. Because there's been times when people have been on this show and they said that their characters actually direct them as the author. You think you're going in one direction, they're like, wait, no, we're going to go this way. And you take a completely different turn that you as the author feel like you're more in the passenger seat than the driver's
Yeah, that's
seat.
happened to me. And there's been lots of times I was sure my characters had a bad idea. Like, and I've resisted it for a long time. I'd come with the idea, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want that to happen, or that's terribly cliche and stupid. Like, I shouldn't do that. But in the end, what I've learned and what I continue to learn is the more I listen to that first instinct, the more right they usually are. It's usually the best thing I can do for the story. So there's definitely like an element of trusting whatever it is, if it's your intuition, if it's the story, if it's your subconscious who already has plotted things out and you just don't know about it, however that works, I don't know. But there definitely is an element of just trusting that the story that's coming is the one that needs to be written. Yeah.
See, now that sounds fantastic to me and magical. That there's this, like, what is that thing that's drawing and leading then? I don't understand.
Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a wonderful book called Big Magic, and it's about creativity and everything. Everyone who wants to be a creative person should read this book. It's great. And in it, she talks about ideas as being self-aware entities with agency who seek out the creators that they think will best manifest them into the world. And I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how the world works, but I love that imagery. I love that idea because that is what it feels like to me. It's like you're just going about your everyday business and all of a sudden this idea just like pops in there. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I should create that. And if you don't move on it, if you don't act on it, those ideas tend to go away. And even if you think of them later, there's no spark there to give you the impetus to actually create it. But if you do move on it, and if you trust it and you can get into it, then it's magical, like you say. It's a really fun process, and you never know exactly where it's going to go.
That little tap on the shoulder that says, you should do this. You should go this way, right? Yeah. And you're like, who's tapping me right now? Like, what? Yeah. I wasn't even thinking. I wasn't even in the mindset or the mode to be thinking about creating something. And all of a sudden, it's like right here. I've woken up to go to work, and I wake up and I have an idea. I have a website domain. I have all of the information, all the pieces, it's all done. And sometimes that's so annoying because I feel like it's not me. And I'm like, well, why can't I be part of the process? It's like, no, go execute this. Just go do this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who is this that's doing this tap on the shoulder? I don't understand. Why me is another thing. And I noticed too that if I don't act on those things, it just seems to leave.
Yeah.
It just goes away.
Dissipates.
It goes to someone else maybe. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what Big Magic claims is like, if an author says no for whatever reason, then it will go find a new one, because these ideas want to be made. They want to find their way into the world. So let's find someone else who'll do it.
Any suggestions on how we as creative people can open ourselves up to maybe being available to the tap on the shoulder?
Well, I think that the taps on the shoulder will come regardless of what you're doing. The question is what to do once they're there. And if you can develop a mindset in which you are open to that and you're open to acting on that, because we generally have a lot of voices in our heads that are very ready to negate things like that, or creativity, or things that are different, things we can't fully plan out, things we can't necessarily, I don't want to say trust, but, just basically things that are unknown or uncertain. Humans generally have a big resistance to that. So I think that if we can say, okay, I'm going to give myself, if I have this idea that comes in and say you're the kind of creator you are as a writer, say I'm going to give myself, even if it's just 15 minutes a day, just to jot these things down and just put a few words down and see what comes of it. And maybe the next day you take another 15 minutes and just see if it goes somewhere. It can really be as small a step as that to get you started. If it's something that's new to you, if it's something that feels uncertain, and just see where it goes. And I think it's important to remember that even though creativity can feel unpredictable or uncertain or whatever, we are always in control. You are always in a place where you can say, you know what, not right now. This is my life and I'm doing something else right now. Not right now. So you are always in the driver's seat. But it's more like being willing to, have a navigator in the passenger seat telling you where the map says to go next. Yeah. And if you can relinquish enough control to listen to that, then you might go somewhere interesting. Whereas if you're trying to drive and hold the map at the same time, it's a little more awkward.
Yeah. I like the idea, like you said, about taking your notebook with you everywhere and jotting things down. I think that tap on the shoulder comes to creative people in a creative space. So you're in the mindset of being creative, you're writing, you're doing things, you're putting words on paper. And in that process of being creative, it opens the door maybe to the tap being a little more noticeable, possibly, than if you're in a non-creative space and you're not thinking about anything and you're distracted by life or TV or whatever else, entertainment. You're not in that space of being creative. I think anytime we can be creative, it just opens the door just a little bit for us.
Absolutely. I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which I'm pretty sure is from The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron or something, if I'm remembering right, but it's the idea of showing up. Like your biggest job is not to create something brilliant. Your biggest job is to just show up on the page. And so if you can just consistently be present enough to have the opportunity, like you say, to be in a creative space, if you do that every day for a week, there might be 5 or 6 of those days where nothing much is happening. And that's where the voices of doubt usually trigger and say, well, this isn't happening. This isn't working. I'm not good at this. I'm quitting. But just wait for that one day. It's not every day that you show up that's going to be creative genius, but you got to wait for the one day where it works and you actually hit on something. And if you don't give yourself the routine and the consistency of constantly having this creative space, like you say, well, it's very rare that it's going to hit full blast while you're in the middle of doing your taxes or something. It's just yeah. So you have to create, you have to carve out a part of your life that is for being creative, for sure. But if you can put more emphasis on the quantity of being there rather than the quality, I think that's key.
I had an author on the show last week, and he mentioned a quote by Ray Bradbury. And the quote basically summarized says, write a short story every week for 52 weeks. And the chance of you writing 52 bad stories in a row is pretty slim.
Yeah.
So one of them,
at least going to be some improvement there.
Something's going to be good out of 52. So there's no way you're going to do 52 bad ones in a row. And I'm like, that is so good. Like, you're in the habit, you're writing, you're doing the thing, and something's going to happen. So I like that. Yeah.
And I would also advocate for, if short stories aren't your thing, because I tried to make myself write short stories for a really long time because that was the going advice. You want to learn to be a writer, start with short stories. I cannot write a short story. I just can't do it. And once I started letting myself work towards something longer, then an actual story started to come out. So if you feel like your creativity is going against whatever the going advice is, just let yourself do it. Like, who is it going to care? No one's going to die. No one's going to, just let yourself do it. You can always quit, right? But if you never start, you don't even have the option of quitting. You're just not doing it.
Nice. The readers that are here, they're not here specifically to learn how to write a book. They're here for you. They want to connect with you as the author. Give us the big picture for the book and all the things that are coming down the road for you as an author. But kind of introduce us to the world. What are we going to experience as a reader? What is your love letter to a new reader coming to you for the first time?
Sure. So my trilogy that I've recently completed, the 3rd book is coming out this summer. It's called the Trianid. And the Trianid is a made-up word that I made up. I get asked that a lot. Like, what is this word? I don't know it. I made it up. So what the Trianid is, it takes place in this kind of medieval-based fantasy kingdom, castles, dragons, this kind of thing. And the Trianid is this group of 3 powerful people, each one who has a very special kind of supernatural gift. And together they help run the kingdom along with the royal family, in order to keep the kingdom balanced and healthy and this kind of thing. So the 3 characters are the Keeper of Scales, who is someone who is gifted with sight of the faerie realm. And they act as kind of the ambassador between the human world and the faerie world and make sure that everything stays good there. And they also act as a healer then. The second is the Slayer of Monsters, who basically, if there are monsters in the kingdom, which hasn't happened in a long time as our story starts, they're in charge of slaying them. But when that's not happening, they are the ambassador between the human world and the world of magical creatures. So merfolk, dragons, griffins, centaurs, this kind of thing. And the third is the Seer of Strands. And she is an abbess in an abbey who has visions of the future that she weaves into tapestries so that the whole Trianid can interpret these tapestries and see what clues for the future may be coming, and they can best prepare the kingdom accordingly. So basically the story starts where the main character, Alyen, who is the princess, who is the sole heir to the throne, and she's lived her whole life getting ready to take over her parents' kingdom. She likes what she does. She's great at what she does. She doesn't have any plans or dissatisfactions with this life plan. But what starts happening is little by little, she starts realizing that she has the sight of the fairy realm. And whereas this would usually be a cause for great celebration because it would mean there's a new apprentice and the, continuation of that tradition, etc. In her case, this is terrible news because she knows she can't do both jobs. She has to pick one or the other. And this would be devastating, she knows, to her family. It would, put the kingdom in a rough spot, etc. So she's keeping this a secret. But it's becoming more and more insistent. It's becoming harder and harder to hide. And she keeps waiting for someone else in the kingdom to say, hey, I have the sight. And it's just not happening. And so eventually what happens is that the Seer of Strands receives a vision that there's this ancient prophecy that foretells big doom and darkness coming, and it's happening now. And she realizes that she cannot in good conscience not tell people that this is happening in case she's the only one who can take on that lineage, which is going to be really needed in this coming time of darkness. So that's how the thing opens, when she has to admit that this has been going on with her and the whole, different paths that this takes her down. So that's how the story opens. And so the whole first book is kind of about her journey, about the choices she makes and the unfolding of those events. And there's lots of quests, and there's some romance, and there's a lot of adventures and great characters. I have to say, I love my characters. I love them so much. I love them as more, just as much as regular people that I know. So yeah, that's kind of where the story starts out.
When you approach writing a trilogy, how much of the stories combined do you know? Are you just going one to the next, or is there a big story arc across all three? How do you do this?
So in this time, at least, writing a trilogy actually happened because of a misunderstanding.
Oh.
Yeah, it was. I actually started out thinking I was only writing a standalone book. I thought it was just going to be this first book. And by the time I got to the end of it, I loved the characters and the world and everything so much. I was like, well, maybe I could think about a sequel. And I was just starting to kind of think maybe I could do that. So when I published the first one, I said, okay, I'll go out on a limb and just say that this is the first book in a series called the Trianid. And that's how I published it, thinking there would just be a sequel and that would be it. But when I guess readers read that the series was called the Trianid, they assumed that the word sounded like a trilogy. And so in these reviews that started coming in, everyone started referring it to the first book of a trilogy. I was like, oh my God, I never said that. And so I had this moment where I was like, well, what do I do? Again, you're in control. I could ignore it and just write my sequel and be done. But I was like, but it's just set up so well for a trilogy. There's the three characters and the word is there and everyone's expecting it. And I had zero idea at all of how a third book could go. But I was like, okay, I'm going to take the leap of faith and I'm just going to trust that I will come up with something. And so I went with it. I was like, oh yes, I'm writing a trilogy. And so I just went with it, and fortunately, the ideas came, and the third book at this point is now my favorite of the three. So it ended up well. It happened, but yeah, in the beginning, it was not planned out at all. It was an accident.
So if you ever wonder as a reader if leaving reviews where you give your opinions and your feedback about the books you're reading, if the authors are reading it, they are, and it could actually turn into a change of plans for your favorite author.
They're very impactful.
Right? Mm-hmm. So your words have power as readers. Don't forget that.
Absolutely. No, authors are definitely, and it's honestly I love getting reviews, even if they're not great reviews, because especially having a background as a stage performer, musicians, you get feedback immediately in the moment when you're doing that. And if you're a writer, you put your book out, and unless someone decides to take time out of their day to say something about it or to email you, you have no idea how it's being received at all. It's a very different creative experience. So I love it when people leave reviews.
Okay. So again, reinforcing that for everyone. We've talked about that on
Yeah.
the show. Often your reviews really do matter. And I love that. One thing I kind of picture when I think of an author writing a trilogy, even on when it's an accident, is I kind of picture like the in a typical police movie or TV show, they have like the cork board and they have the push pins and then the string that ties this to that. And there's a picture and that picture belongs to this person. And then they went here and everything's kind of like mapped out. And it's kind of, then they stand back and go, oh, right. It kind of makes sense once you kind of map it all out like that. Do you map anything out like that when you write?
I know there are authors who do, and there's software programs that help with that and everything. If that's how your creativity works, you certainly can. I never got that detailed into outlining. I basically have a document that has like any idea that came to me that lists it out so I don't forget anything, so it stays in order. So I just kind of keep this living document of notes going. But that's like pretty much as far as I actually plan out. Actually, the last book of the trilogy was the one where I had to do the most of that because there's two different storylines moving at the same time, which intersect now and then. And I had to keep track of like how much time had passed in each one before they intersected again. And at one point it was like, oh man, 2 days passed here, but only one passed here. So I have to change the story and figure out how to reconcile that. And so that was definitely the trickiest where I had to do the most of that. But other than that, I'm kind of a very loose outliner when it comes to that.
So you have a trilogy with a new book coming out this summer. The name of my show is Living the Next Chapter. So I'm always kind of pressing my guests for this, even though some books are just coming out or just released. And they're like, let me take my breath, Dave, before I even think about this. But as we live our next chapter, you've done the 3. Are you seeing a path for you to continue writing as an author into the future then?
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, I was about halfway done with this last book when, like you say, all of a sudden, this completely unrelated idea just like popped full forward into my head. And it was like, it was so insistent. Like I had to write out the first chapter right away. And so I did. I was like, oh man, I really should be like finishing this other book. But I got so excited about it. I was like, okay, you know what? You're just going to have to hold your horses and let me finish this one. And so I've been holding on to that for a long time. And so now I'm just starting to like go back and look at how to flesh that out. And I'm really excited about where that one's going. So yeah, there's definitely another project already in the works. And I'm excited to write it.
I know the listeners are going to be screaming at their speakers or at their headphones right now because I'm going to do it again. But isn't that intimidating, though, to get this inspiration from nowhere when you're working on a different project, trying to wrap something up, and now there's something else coming to you?
Yeah, it is. It goes both ways because on the one hand, it's a relief that like, oh, once I'm done with this, there will be more ideas. I'm not just done. But on the other hand, it's like, oh God, if I don't move on it now, it might go away. And so there's like that kind of fear factor, or the fear, like, I don't want it, to lose interest in the book I'm already writing, because of this one. So when you're being creative, there's always something to be worried or intimidated or fearful about. There just always is. And that's part of the game. And you just learn to take deep breaths and say, going to do it one step at a time. I'm going to finish this. Then we're going to do that. If the timing doesn't work out, I'm sure something else will come because this did. And you just, you hack at it bit by bit.
What's your common thread through the trilogy that kind of ties everything together without any spoilers, that kind of just pulls the story along for the reader?
I think, there's definitely, there's a lot of different themes that kind of go through all 3. There's kind of a romantic story arc that goes through the 3. There's also the fantasy plot that goes through the 3. If I had to pick, I think the one thing that really strings them all together is a theme of finding and accepting and embracing who you are in your totality, even and especially if it doesn't really fit the mold, because that's how we harness and are able to, use and express our greatest magic, is if you accept all the parts of yourself, not just the ones that were meant to be or socially acceptable or whatever. So I think that that's definitely the overarching theme of the book is self-acceptance. And yeah, I think that's basically what ties them all together.
Why is that so important to you?
I think probably because that's been a journey for me in my lifetime, and I think it is for a lot of people, especially if you have any kind of neurodivergence or in anything like that. If you don't really fit the mold. I was a kid who didn't fit the mold, and so really starting to accept all the different parts of myself, accept the dark parts as well as the light parts, accept the different parts as well as the parts that fit in. That's a continuing journey that I think a lot of people experience. And so I think it just made its way into my writing unintentionally. I never, planned out that I'm going to write a series about self-acceptance. I didn't do that. But, if I reverse analyze it, looking back now at what I wrote, that's the kind of the theme I can see running through it. And it makes sense to me for my life and for how I've grown over the years.
What are you most proud about when you look at the trilogy as a whole?
I think I'm most proud that I got really emotionally authentic in it. I did the hard work of facing my own emotions and my own experiences so that I could dig out something really authentic and vulnerable for my characters so that they could feel really real and so that their character arcs could have these really cathartic emotional moments. And so I'm proud of myself for that because I feel like there is a lot of, as fantastical as it is, I feel like there is a lot that's really vulnerable and real in it. And that's what I'm most proud of.
I like that. What did not make the cut in the trilogy that for you, you're kind of like, was that a good decision or not? I'm not sure yet, but it didn't make it into the book. Anything stand out for you as the author?
There's a lot that got cut out, as particularly the first book, because it was my first book. And so when I hired an editor, it was basically like, wow, he did such a great job. Rewrite half of it. And so So I rewrote half of it and sent it back. She's like, oh, it's so much better. You did such great work. Rewrite the first quarter and it'll be great. And so I rewrote the first quarter again. And basically, and we kept doing that a couple times. And in the end, she's like, you know what? The basic premise, the premise of the story was different when I first wrote it. And she's like, it's just not quite working. So you need to change the beginning premise to make it more believable. And that, and then the story will work. And she was right. It was absolutely the right call. So there's whole big chunks of stuff that I wrote from the beginning of the first book that were cut and never made it back in. And some of it was like some good ideas, but in the end, I'm so glad I cut them because it did end up being a much better book as it ended up being, even if I had to cut out some things that I liked. Yeah.
That's interesting because I would think that as an author, you're proud of what you've written, you give it to an editor and you're thinking maybe a couple grammatical things I need to tweak, but it should be good. It should be fine, right? But when you get that kind of feedback, let's just delete the first half of the book. You're like, wait a minute, right? I'm kind of tied to this emotionally as the author. I didn't put out junk. I wanted to be good from the moment I started. Is that really kind of hard to hear those words though?
It is the absolute hardest part of the writing process, at least for me. But it's also the most important and the most valuable, in my opinion. I think if I made one excellent decision as a writer, it was hiring the editor I did. Shout out to Rebecca Faith Heyman. But yeah, no, she was excellent because she was clear, she was honest, she was kind about it. She wasn't mean in her feedback at all by any means. But she never hesitated to just say, look, you got something to unpack here, or this is just not working. You got to rethink it. Or just like, I know you can do better than this because you're a better writer than this. This is too easy a solution. Up the ante, raise the bar. And so she really, over the course of the trilogy, pushed me to be a better and better author with each time. And when I got the first feedback back, it is hard to hear, that all these things you wrote just aren't working well or whatever. And I said, well, here's one of these places where I have a choice. I can either say that I'm going to pout about it and not listen or give up or whatever, or I can take this as an education because I didn't get an English degree. I didn't set out in college to be a writer, so this is how I'm going to learn how to do this. And so I took all of her words and I soaked them all in and I learned whatever I could from them and I tried to make it better with each book. And by the time I got to the third book, there were chapters where she's like, not a single note. And so I was like, great, I actually learned something. And so, yeah, it is really hard to hear that. But if you work at it, it becomes easier as you go. And it becomes more and more enjoyable as you go. And at this point, I love sending my book to an editor. Whereas before it was a little daunting. I mean, it's always daunting. It is always daunting. But it gets better as you go.
For readers, are we reading in order to follow
it's
the
best to read them in order. Yeah, it's best. And the first one, because I thought it was a standalone, if you want to try it out, you're not going to be left hanging. If you just try the first book and you're like, that's all I want to do, that's fine. So the first book can be read alone if you want, or you can move on to the other three. I will say if you do continue to the second, you're going to want to go to the third because the second does not wrap up as cleanly.
Okay. All right. So that's good to know from a reader's perspective as well. Before we jump off and talk about the website again, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank
it's
you.
Very green. Again, I love it.
It is very green.
You have some things for us as people coming to your website for the first time around your newsletter. We can sign up for it. Can you talk a little bit about what the newsletter is about and what we're going to receive, and tell us about your website?
Yeah. The newsletter I send out generally every month. I don't spam people. It's generally once a month, maybe twice, 2 or 3 times if I'm in the middle of a release or something. But it's generally once a month, and it just talks about, it talks a little bit what's going on in my personal life, where I are with my writing, with my work in progress, what stage I am in the publishing sector of those things. Sometimes I give like reading recommendations of books I've read, that kind of thing. So nothing too long, but it definitely is the way to be kept in the loop best about what I'm doing and when books are coming out. And for subscribers who do sign up, you get a free prequel bonus scene to the trilogy that kind of shows the events that led to the whole story being triggered. So you will get that if you sign up for my newsletter. And that's definitely where I'm most active. I do have social media accounts everywhere, but I'm only there intermittently at this point. So, if you want to stay in the loop, the newsletter is definitely the way to go.
Okay. One book that you would recommend as a reader that's maybe current from someone else that you're reading that we could also then recommend to somebody listening here that maybe would complement maybe something that you're writing or be in that kind of same genre for that reader?
Definitely. One of my favorites right now is Adrienne Young. And I discovered her actually through my editor because when I was writing initially and I told her I was struggling to come up with comparable titles because, when you're talking to publishers and agents and everything, they always want to know what the comparable titles are to yours. And I was kind of struggling with that. And she said, go check out Adrienne Young. I think there's a lot of similarities with how you guys tell stories. And she's like, go look at the book Fable. And so I looked up her book Fable and I was so blown away by how amazing that book is. I have recommended it to like everyone since then. And I'm like, I don't know how in the world you ever thought to compare my books to this book because it is so good. But so I was like immensely like humbled and complimented that she like thought of that to begin with. But yeah, go read Adrienne Young, and her book Fable is like absolutely one of my favorite. And it does there is some correlation between that one and the last book of my trilogy. They both have a lot of maritime at sea adventures kind of thing. Yeah. And so it's such a good book. Just read it. It's really good.
There we go. I love getting a recommendation for another book from an author because you're in this space and you know it really well and you know how your book works. And I do love the fact that you do get direction to kind of where do you see your book on the shelf next to fill in the blank, right? That's good information.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like it. And you can come back anytime.
Great.
I'd love for you to come back and continue the conversation. You're very stressful to talk to. You're so chill. And I love having, I'm kidding. You're just so chill. And I just love how you approach your writing. I love how you approach your thought process in all the things you do as an author. I think it's really encouraging for the authors listening and fun for the readers to know that there's a trilogy that's completely done on purpose, not an accident. Well,
not at all an accident.
No, accident. I just like that story. That's unique. I haven't heard that before. So
Yeah, no, it's how it happened,
so good. And please come back. Keep writing.
Thank you.
And I'm really curious about this next book. You got to come back and share that with us in the future.
I will. As soon as it's done, I'll let you know.
Excellent. Everyone, all information for Anne in the show notes. As always, go sign up for her newsletter. It's right there on the website. And get in her world. And you know the power of leaving a review. You heard it here first, everybody. Leave a great review for Anne's all 3 of her books. And I would love to get your thoughts on what Anne's writing. And she'd love to hear your comments as well. Anne, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.